buddy, and sharing whatever I got. It'll be worth what it costs you. Uh, so uh, I, that's it. I do want to say Harold McDowell succeeded me as CEO in 2005, and he's the one that's been leading the continuation of the culture since then. I'm board chair, which is a very easy job, and I meet with Harold for an hour a month most months. So I am not actively involved in running this business at all anymore.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that to the group on the phone. You probably have seen on our website that Jack was also very generous of his time and spent some time with our blogger, Kelly Spores, and shared his reflection about the succession between himself and Harold and how to continue that culture into the future. So I really want you all to take a minute and read that because there's even more lessons to be shared there.
I might just a couple other just facts. The first two CEOs were named Jack Lowe, but this is not a family-owned business. It's an employee-owned business, and Harold is no relationship at all. Secondly, just to give you some scope, this year their revenue will be about $500 million, and they have about 2,000 partners, is our term for employee.
Wow, thank you. So Jack, I'd like to start where it all began. And could you tell me a little bit and tell us a little bit about how the servant leadership culture got started at TD Industries?
Sure. First of all, my dad, I believe, had this spirit about him from the beginning, but he did not at all in the early years expect others to manage in that way, lead in that way. It was just sort of the typical business. You could produce results, okay. And Dad had his way of doing things, but other people had their way of doing things. Then in the late 60s, 69, 70, somewhere along in there, business had grown. It was still tiny compared to today, but it had grown. We probably had 300 or so partners, and we were sort of going through some times of change and times of a little bit unrest in the company. At that time, let's see, 70. I've been there 6 years. I was a junior person in the organization, and what Dad decided to do to address this situation was to have a series of all-day meetings at his mother's home with a group of, typically I think it's about 15 or so employees, and they would be from cross-section across the company. Your immediate supervisor would not be there, and Mother made spaghetti and meatballs every third Wednesday, I think it was, for about a year and a half. And Dad had just come across the Servant as Leader pamphlet, actually the first version of the Servant Leader, which I'm holding up here. It's a little different than the current one. And he had taken to it. And when you got your invitation to come to their home, this was in there. But it was not, and this is what we're going to do, and we just want to let you know about it, and we'll talk about it, is here's something we'd like you to read, and this is one of the things we'll talk about while we're here. And I would say if they spent 6 or 8 hours at those sessions, probably 2 hours was on this. And this is I don't believe, I don't wish I did, but I'm pretty sure I would not have had the confidence to send this to a bunch of mostly blue-collar, probably mostly not high school educated construction workers and service technicians. Service techs were probably all high school educated. But Dad did. He had so much confidence in people. It's hard reading. And but they talked about it, and over the course of a year and a half of these conversations, the only person that was there at all of them besides my dad was his assistant. And she took notes, and they would share those with the next group, and it sort of evolved over time. 2 things came out of it. One was our first ever sort of mission statement. We didn't call it a mission statement. We didn't know what a mission statement was, but it was our first ever, we called it a people objective. And it said something about we want people to be successful here, and to the extent even one person's not successful, that's a major failure or something like that. But the second thing that came out of it was we said we kind of like this idea of servant leadership. We don't understand it. We don't know what to do with it, but we kind of like it, and we're going to embrace it as our model for leadership. And we had been going. One of the things we've been going through was promoting people to leadership roles, and they were not succeeding. And what we finally kind of figured out was, as important as it was to be a good plumber or a good service technician or a good salesperson or a good accountant, and as complicated as those things are, they're not near as complicated as people. And so we had lots of technical training and professional training in our trades and professions, but nothing about leadership. And without that, they were failing. So we started trying to do some leadership development, and we've been at it for, 70 to 15, 45 years? And we haven't produced one perfect servant leader in all that time, except for Dennis. But we've made a lot of progress, and we're a heck of a lot better than we were 45 years ago. So that's how it got started. And we do a ton of leadership development. Anybody's in a pretty good definition of a leader is somebody that influences others, and that's everybody. So everybody is a leader. We say you got to do two things if you want to work at TD. One, you got to produce business results, whatever your responsibilities are. But secondly, you have to help others around you grow. And that's about servant leadership, and we expect everybody to help those around them grow. So long answer, sorry.
That's a perfect answer. So really, you talked about this in terms of really creating a groundswell of those around your dad saying, yes, this is who we want to be, and this is how we want to behave with each other.
Yes. It was some years, though, before we finally said, I don't remember when it was, probably 15, 20 years ago, where we finally drew a line in the sand and said, if you can't do both of these things pretty well, particularly for senior executives, you can't work here. And we have terminated execs who are running very profitable business segments who just could not help those around them grow. And before, we were more patient with that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. More and more people that I spend time talking with is that balance between someone who is really very talented in the work that they do for the company, but leave a trail of bruised people behind them. And how do you make that choice?
Yeah. And how do you figure it out? Is that the question? Or
yeah, how do you figure it out?
Business results are a heck of a lot easier to measure. But there's a lot of things you can do. You can look at turnover. You can look at are they exporting talent? They're building more talent than they need, or are they always needing more talent than they've got? We do a supervisor survey every year where people that every supervisor that has three or more people working for them get some feedback from them in an anonymous survey, and that goes directly to the supervisor. But they need to take it to their supervisor within 2 weeks and say, here's what I got this year, and here's some things that I'm proud of, and here's some things I know I need to work on, and here's sort of what I'm thinking about it. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And those things actually get built into their annual performance plan.
So, I'm going to be continuing to ask questions, but if you have a question, please on the control panel, just raise your hand and I will come to you and unmute your line so that you can ask your question directly. And while you're thinking of yours, I'll ask a follow-up question to Jack. Jack, I know that there have been challenging times over the 70 years that you all have been in business. How do you deal with the tough times as a servant leader?
Well, best way you can. What I believe is that servant leadership builds trust, and with trust you can get through tough times, good times, changing strategies. We've done all those things, and without trust, I just don't know how you get along. But we have and it's not perfect. But these three guys that are sitting here with me can tell you that. But we have a very high trust culture. We trust one another. We like one another. I'll give you just the most dramatic example we had. In the late 80s, the economy in Texas collapsed. Of the 10 largest banks in Texas, 9 of them failed. All the major savings and loans failed. There were 6 of the largest companies in the country that do what we do, and we're the only one that survived. So it was a very, very tough time. In 6 months, our business went in half. From then it was about 120 million to 60 million, or maybe 130 to 65. Our employment went in half, from about 1,200 to about 600. Our bank went broke, so instead of owing the bank $15 million, we owe the federal government $15 million. And we lost half our net worth, if I didn't already say that. So it was a very, very difficult time. In the teeth of all that, I'll skip all the interim, but here's the bottom line. We terminated a defined benefit retirement plan, which was $1 million overfunded, so the company got $1 million. We distributed $4 million to the partners, and they reinvested $1.3 million of that back in the company, and it saved the company. In the teeth of cutting employment in half and a broke, struggling, no assurance it was going to survive company, they took 1/3 of their retirement and invested it back in the company, and it was one of the key ingredients to saving the company. That's trust.
That is trust. And as you said, that's also helping others, because people could easily have gone and put that in the bank for themselves. And
Sure.
they decided to help the company and to help each other. Jack, we have a question from David Grable. So I'm going to unmute you, David, and ask you to ask your question.
Hi, this is David Grable I'm in Waltham, Massachusetts. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts about the latest movements beyond servant leadership, radical management, or holacracy, which begins to eliminate bosses and turns the hierarchy into a network?
Well, another one that you didn't mention is conscious capitalism. I don't know if you're familiar with that, David. I was actually just at the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit. I'm on their board, and one of the things we got was Holacracy, was one of the books they handed out. I hadn't read it yet. But Conscious Capitalism, I think, is very consistent with what we've been doing, what we've learned through servant leadership. They have 4 tenets: one, that a company should have a higher purpose than just making money; 2, that there are multiple stakeholders involved. It's not just the owners, it's the employees, it's the customers, it's the vendors, it's the community. 3, something they call conscious leadership, but often referred to as servant leadership. And then 4, something they call conscious culture, which I think is a subset of conscious leadership or servant leadership. So I know about that. I'm not the holacracy thing. I haven't read it. We have not. We're still, our org chart looks pretty much like it did 40 years. It's upside down now. The CEO's at the bottom and the customers are at the top, and the frontline people serving the customers are next. And but that's about as far as we've gotten on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, Jack, next question I have for you is, you talked about the things that set TDIndustries apart are the partners, the professionals who are responsible. How do you make sure you find the people that fit into your culture? How is Harold continuing to do that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I think. Maybe I'll ask these fellows that are sitting here in the room with me to respond as well. One, particularly if we're hiring an exec to come in. We hired a fellow a couple of years ago to run our Dallas operations. We do an awful lot of sort of trying to assess, are they really into our philosophy and supportive of it? But mostly we hire frontline workers. There's no hood you can put over somebody's head and figure out if they're a servant leader or not. And often, I think many people are skeptical when they first come here. But the gestation period, I think, is about a year. It varies, but something like that. And some of them get it and want to stick around. Some of them think it's weird and leave. Some of them, like the work, like the pay, don't want to do the servant leadership business, and we terminate them.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dennis or Stephen, any of you guys got a comment on that?
Well, I will agree with what you said about when I first hired in. I've been here about 4 years. But when I first hired in, I thought that it was a fantasy the way people describe this company. But it really is kind of what they say. And I look at it as my job, and I tell this to Jack and our CEO, I'm going to continue to make sure we are who we say we are. And so far, that's who we are. We are who we say we are.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Some people come here. I had an experience a few years ago, 25 years ago. I was hiring a new executive assistant, and they did an unusual, or I don't know if it was unusual, something that I was not too familiar with. They had, I don't know, a dozen or so candidates, and that had applied, and they brought them to a group interview. And the woman that I eventually hired, Patricia Martin, as she's listening to the group interview, she's saying, wow, this is great. This is what I want to do. But as she was walking out with some of the other people, so there were several of them saying, this is weird. I don't want to do this. So I think some people sort of self-select out too, And some people think it's weirder than it is. It's not a cult. We've got all kinds of people here. One thing people often say is, oh, you're a Christian organization. I quickly say, no, we are not a Christian organization. We certainly got a lot of Christians here, but we got a lot of other stuff too, and we welcome it.
Yeah. Thank you. David, your hand is still up. Okay, I see you said no. Thank you. So Jack, next question for you. How does being employee-owned help TD Industries stay on the best companies to work for list?
I don't know. We don't tease that out. I don't think employee ownership is sort of the centerpiece of who we are and what makes us who we are. I think it's very supportive of it, but there are great companies that aren't employee-owned, and there are snake pits that are employee-owned. So I think it's reinforcing of who we are and what we stand for and that we want to share. Dad started employee ownership when there were 30 people at the company back in 1952. He just thought it was fair that employees should share the benefits of the company's success. But so I don't know, you guys got any thoughts about that?
I agree with, once again, I agree with them that employee ownership is not what makes this a great place to work. It's when you walk around here, what you feel from everybody who walk in the halls, or how eager people are to chip in and help you out, how eager people are to help others out from other companies. Not to get in Jack's way, but an incident that just happened a few days ago out on the job site is one of our employees saw somebody from another contracting company who was working unsafely, and instead of hollering at him, he pulled him to the side and taught him how to do his job better. Didn't ask for any reward, just taught the guy how to do his job better and went back to work. That's the kind of people that we have here.
Thank you. That is such a fascinating statement. It had nothing to do with your company, but he was being unsafe. And so many people talk to us about safety as such a huge requirement that says we need to be servant leaders because there is so much safety at risk in some of these environments.
Yeah. But we actually had a pretty average safety record 25 years ago, and we kind of went to work on it, and we got where we're one of the best in our industry, and as far as a safety record. And then we brought a fellow on our board that was an exec with Marathon Oil Company, and he looked at our safety record and says, that's bad. We said, bad? We thought it was good. He said, no, that's not good at all. And so we've reset our goal to zero recordable incidents by 2020. And we're working hard at it, or they're working hard at it. I'm not careful at all, but but everybody else is. So we learn from other. We've learned more from companies and people outside our industry than we have from companies and people in our industry. We learned a ton from our competitors, our customers, our suppliers, but we've learned more from Southwest Airlines and Synovus Financial Corp and Marathon Oil Company and the Container Store and Whole Foods Market and people like that, that just Toyota, that just blow your blinders back about what's possible. That wasn't the question, was it, Pat? Sorry.
No, but since you made that statement, I'd love to know what kinds of things you've learned from them.
Safety, quality. Synovus is who gave us the courage to say, if you can't be a servant leader, you can't work here. Southwest Airlines, of course, their spirit and the fun that they have. We try and have fun. We're not as goofy as they are, but we try to have fun. Dennis sings a little bit, but
Do you want to sing for us?
We've learned a ton. We just learned a ton, and we're still learning. You know, it's an ongoing deal.
Thank you. I'm really interested in how leaders are developed at TD Industries. Are they developed? Do they emerge? And how does servant leadership play a role in that?
Well, it's critical. We do tons of leadership development. I don't know how many. Any you guys got any ideas how many days of servant leadership we do a year? You know,
we have a minimum of 32 hours a year. Minimum of 32 hours a year we have to do in training, and we get credit and vacation time and other rewards for any other training that we take on for ourselves.
But we have what, leadership 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that are 1 or 2 days each. That if you're a supervisor or even look like you're moving towards being a supervisor, you'll go to servant leadership training 1, the next year 2, next year 3, next year 4, next year 5, next year. You know, some years down the road, we got one now for people that hadn't been to one in a good while. It's sort of a refresher. Remember what we said we were going to do? Yeah. And I think you know Ann McGee Cooper, Pat.
Right.
She's been doing that for us for almost 40 years now.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, did Ann help you with all of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she developed most of it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
But we did, you know, Covey's 7 Habits. Do we still do that? Yeah, Covey's 7 Habits. We still have diversity training. Yeah.
Culture training. We have a lot of training. As a matter of fact, I'm putting together a comprehensive list of our entire training in all of our departments, period, and I'm on 3 pages so far.
Yeah. That 32 hours is not all leadership. Some of it is technical skills and, you know, learning to become a master plumber or develop other skills. Safety, yeah.
Absolutely. David has another question for us.
Okay, David.
So following up on the training, is your servant leadership curriculum something that you'd be willing to share with others?
I don't know. Did we share that? I think maybe we do.
I'm pretty sure that we do. I'm pretty sure that we do. But
we could certainly share a course overview. I mean, we got a book or a binder that has, you know, all the development stuff that we have. So yeah, we could get that to you.
Thank you. So I'll follow up and we'll get that and share it with our members. Thank you for the question, David.
Thank you.
I'd like to add one other thing also. When I speak to our head of HR, which we call the people department, one of the first things she told me is we hire character first. We can teach you your job, but the character is the most important thing that we hire here.
Absolutely.
And Dennis is a character.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Thank you. All right. And next question. Actually, let me just pause for a moment to see if anyone else in our audience here has a question that you'd like to pose to Jack or anyone else in the room with him. So Jack, while folks are thinking about that, what last piece of advice would you give to the leaders on this call and others who are really working to commit themselves to their servant leadership journey?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Stay at it. It's not a straightforward journey. Try and connect with some others that seem to have a similar interest. Might be, the team you work with. It might be some people that around your organization from different places. One thing that I think is good, and our latest version of the Servant as Leaders got some what do they call it? Questions or dialogue.
Yep, discussion
questions. And just read it and talk about it. A question that people have often asked me is, I really like this, but the management doesn't there. CEO here doesn't. What do I do? Well, one, I'd say do what you can where you. Arthur Ashe says, do what you can where you are with what you got, or something like that. And so just go to work in your little work group, and I bet you it will start out. It'll show up on people's radar screen as a high-performing work group. When somebody comes and says, what the heck y'all doing over here? You say, well, a lot of things, but we're got involved in this servant leadership. Really seemed to help. Another thing, I'm a subversive person. I try and do what works. And I'll give you an example. In 2002, I was elected to the Dallas School Board, which is a very contentious group. And one of the first things I did, which is very, in hindsight, was inappropriate, I sent everybody on the board a copy of the Servant as Leader with a little letter that said, this has been helpful to me and TD, and if you'd ever like to talk about it, I'd like to talk to you. I never even got anybody acknowledging receiving it. Nevertheless, saying I want to talk about it. So I said, well, that didn't work. So now what am I going to do? So I went to the head of professional development at the district. And I said, I know you do a lot of professional development, and sometimes you're looking for something to do, something to put on for people, because they have a requirement for so much professional development a year. If you want something on leadership, I didn't say servant leadership, but if you want something on leadership, I'll be glad to do that. And over the next couple of years, I probably did 6, 8, 10 2-hour sessions with 50, 60, 80 administrators in the district on servant leadership. And lo and behold, I started hearing it bubbling up here, there, and the other place. In fact, we had the annual conference in Dallas some years ago, and the school district was one of our host groups that put up $15,000, $20,000 and sent 50 people or something. And it is still not a servant leadership organization, but there's a lot more people know about it now than did 15 years ago. So do what works. And I would say this further. I say this to my kids, not that they pay any attention to me, but if you really don't think this, what I try to encourage my kids to do, they're 39, 39, 45, and 47. Don't tell them I told that, but particularly not my girls. But I'd encourage them, don't go work for a company that does something you're interested in. Go to work for a company that has a culture that you like, and you'll get interested in what they do. They didn't particularly do that, but that's what I advised them. And I would advise people, if you're really in an organization that you just don't feel good in the spirit, I'd get out of it, because there are plenty around that you would feel good in, and life's too short.
Thank you so much, Jack. I really appreciate you taking the time to spread your thoughts about servant leadership and how you live your life based on it. You continue to be a great advocate for everything that we're trying to do at the center. I failed to mention that you are trustee emeritus of our center, will continue to be a great advisor to us, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with all of us today.
Could I share one last historical fact with you, Pat, or are we out of time?
We have time. We love to hear your stories.
Okay. Well, I told you that Dad shared this pamphlet. The original Servant as Leader was Bob Greenleaf wrote it for college students who were sort of rebelling on campuses, and Kent State was the worst example. Most of y'all don't even know about this, but half a dozen students got killed by somebody in a sort of riot about what was going on, but they were also taking over chancellors and holding them in their office for a couple of days and doing stuff. And so he wrote this book, the original version, for students, college students. And his point was, if there's something about an organization you don't like, don't burn it down, change it. Get inside and do the hard work, and he did that at AT&T, which is no small organization. And in the original pamphlet, a couple of things. My dad got this thing. I don't know where he got it somewhere, and he was buying them. Well, he's buying them that he was mailing out to employees, but he's also buying them and passing them out all over town. He was very active in the community, and I get people all the time still telling me, your dad gave me that Servant as Leader book back in 1972. And so somewhere along the way, a year or two later, Dad gets a letter from Bob Greenleaf, said, you're not, among other things, you're 90% of my business. What are you doing with those things? So that struck up a friendship that lasted for many years between Bob and Esther and Dad and Mother and us at TD. But one of the things I find interesting, my wife has taught me to say, I find this interesting, because sometimes I get going, well, this is interesting, and she'll say, Jack, that's not interesting at all. So I find this interesting. In the original pamphlet, there were a few contemporary people quoted. In the new pamphlet, I don't think there are. The new, since 72 or 3 or whenever it came out. But in the original pamphlet that I think came out in 69, there are a few people quoted. And one of them was the president of the student body at Wellesley College in her 69 commencement address. Quote, too long our leaders have viewed politics as the art of the possible. And the challenge now is to practice politics, the art of making what appears impossible, possible. And she goes on, but that speaker was Hillary Rodham. Interesting.
It is.
I find that interesting.
Yet someone else we should send the original, the writings to. Bring it up to date.
Oh, I'll tell you one other thing. We did, 25 years ago, maybe 20, I can't remember. The Greenleaf Center was nothing. We didn't do anything. I was on the board. A big decision would be where we're going to reprint some more pamphlets or not. But one of the things we decided to do, just sort of reach out, we mailed a copy of the pamphlet to a bunch of people. We made it all the senators, all the congressmen, the cabinet, the president, all the governors, maybe some others. The Supreme Court, I think we mailed it to the Supreme Court, and just said, here it is, a cover letter, read this. If it strikes a chord with you, let us know. We got maybe 10 responses, maybe 20. 2 of them appeared to be thoughtful. Most of them were very cursory, but 2 of them appeared to be thoughtful. And one of those came from the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton.
Huh. Interesting.
No, small word. Well, I find that interesting.
What's really interesting, I share with all of you that just recently there is a local government who has been reaching out to us and wants to talk a little bit about how they're going to move their community forward from their vantage point. And little by little, they're doing this same kind of grassroots thought of sharing the literature and letting people absorb. And in fact, we shared with them a couple of copies of Kent Keith's A Case for Servant Leadership. Since then, they have been buying them by the 80s and hundreds to share with the elected officials in their community. So there's a lot to be said for letting people come to it on their own, as opposed to us trying to drag them into the conversation.
Yeah. Let me add one last thing.
Thank you.
My dad discovered this pamphlet in '69 or '70. I've got the original that he got, and it's got a little note clipped on the front of it. It says, "Please keep these for my personal use." I have them marked up, and it's underlined all throughout this thing. This is that original version. But at the end, Greenleaf says 4 things. Says 1, not much that is really important to be accomplished with coercive power. Nothing much happens without a dream. For something great to happen, there must be a great dream. To refuse to examine the assumption one lives by is immoral. And then finally, in the end, all that matters is love and friendship. Excuse me, get a little choked up here. To which my dad has written in, amen. So, amen.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your time. And
Pleasure.
Thank you all for joining us. I hope that you'll join us again next month when we discuss Kelvin Redd's new book. And please give us feedback on things that will continue to add value to each of you. We are so committed to serve our members well. Have a wonderful day.